this one might be a lot more interesting for a lot of people because I really wanted to talk about, we talked a little bit about St. Peter's on the last episode, and we talked about how they had such a beautiful underdog story and they made it all the way to the Elite Eight and all of these things. But meanwhile, while the national championship was happening on Monday, it just totally glossed over everybody's head, really, that the fact that the women also had an NCAA tournament and that UConn and South Carolina dueled it out on Sunday the day before, and and South Carolina and Aaliyah Boston came out on top and won the NCAA tournament for women's basketball. Um, Women's college basketball is actually so competitive and it's so fun to watch. The players are really freaking good. They can play the game at a very high level. And it's a college sports tournament that doesn't get talked about at all, really a lot. It's kind of a subculture within college basketball, but like I said earlier, it's truly basketball played at a very high level and basketball in kind of a more pure form. I was discussing this with a friend a couple years ago, and she was telling me, she's like, if you watch women's basketball, the way that they construct plays and they run sets and they run like their system is very it's much more basketball fundamentally oriented rather than like men's basketball and like even in college and in the pros, which is much more iso ball and much more like individual, like one-on-one matchups. And women's basketball is more of a team oriented sport. And I think in watching in watching the little bit of women's basketball that I have noticed that pattern really come to life, which is kind of cool. But anyway, that's the sport of it. But let's talk about some of these athletes, man, because there have been so many awesome WNBA athletes who have come through this college tournament and play basketball, like I said, at this different style and this different level. And I honestly, I'm going to say this right now. I would watch a lot more WNBA basketball. I would. I don't right now. If there was a team in my area, 100%, I would be watching Bay Area WNBA basketball. Freaking 100%. Are you kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? I would watch a lot of WNBA basketball if there was a Bay Area team. I'm just saying, WNBA, where's the Bay Area team at? Oakland, San Francisco. We could use one. We could freaking use one, and I would be their first fan. I can't honestly, like me personally, as an individual, can't really get into a sport without me having a rooting interest in something. And to have a rooting interest for me, there's got to be a connection. And so the only way there would really be a connection for me is if I really liked a player and just like watch that team and I would just be a fan of that team, or if it was in the location. And I would love there to be a Bay WNBA team. And the WNBA in general is like a very growing sport. So I would love to see there be more teams across the country. And hopefully the popularity continues to go up. That would be my hope. But some of my favorite, lady ballers, but lady ballers. I guess what's a good term for it? I guess some of my favorite female ballers are Paige like these are my favorites. Like these are the ones like I've been following for a while and I really like. I really like Paige Bueckers. I love the way she plays basketball. I think they call her the female Steph. She's kind of like it. She can just pull up from 50 feet and drill shots. Like she's super fun. She plays with like a swagger to her. That's hella fun. Like she just has that contagious energy when she's on the court. She's a flashy like guard, and I love watching her play. She's a lot of fun. Sabrina Ionescu, who's more of like that small forward, like she's more of a wing. For those of you that are familiar with basketball, so it's not a lot of like ball handling or any of that, but it's like getting down. Like for her, it's like finding those mid-range jumpers. She played like facilitating the basketball, and she does it really well and really effectively. I've been watching her since Oregon. So definitely go check out Paige Bueckers and Sabrina Ionescu if you're like into basketball at all. And Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark is this guard from Iowa. She and Paige Bueckers played in the Sweet 16 last year for the NCAA tournament. Caitlin Clark is a shooter too. I love watching shooters. Like she can shoot the fucking ball really well. I don't know if Iowa did that great this year, but Caitlin Clark had a hell of a season. I think she averaged like she had a good season from what I saw. But yeah, she's a shooter as well. So I don't know. I like watching flash. Like I feel like everybody's got a type for basketball players and just players in general. And my type for basketball players is flashy point guards or flashy guards in general. I just like watching like beautiful dimes. That could come off so wrong based on what we're talking about right now. But I mean, just like beautiful passes, just 3-point shots from 50 feet out. Like I like the splash. That's what I like. And so I'm a big guard guy. when it comes to who I like. Even though Sabrina Ionescu isn't a guard, she's a wing player, but she's a lot of fun. But here's the thing, though. This is something I've noticed actually. Is my question is that why do like in the WNBA, one of the main rules actually for the WNBA is that these women have to stay in school for at least 4 years in order for them to compete professionally, or they have to be 4 years removed from high school. And so my question is like, why? Why can men get out of it after a year? And like men, in college basketball for guys, like there are guys that can just declare after the NBA draft as soon as they lose in the NCAA tournament. Like they have no obligation to go back to school. They lose in the NCAA tournament. Oh, time to move on with my basketball career and go to the pros. If you're that talented, like Paige Bueckers is extremely talented. Like she was the number one. I think she was like the number one recruit in her class out of high school for women. Like if she was a guy, like she would have gone to Duke, played for a year, and probably been pro right now. She would have been pro. This would have been her rookie year this year in the league if she was a guy. But the fact is, she's a girl, so she's got to stay in school for 4 years and then go to the draft, where she will probably, most likely, in all aspects, be the number one overall pick. But and the same thing with Sabrina too. Like Sabrina Ionescu was stuck in college for 4 years, and arguably, I mean, after her, I think, yeah, her draft stock almost decreased, TBH. Because I think she would have got number one after her junior year, but she went 2 her senior year. But I mean, that doesn't matter. She still went top of the draft. And even people like Cameron Brink, who's at Stanford, who led them to a Final Four run, and Aaliyah Boston, who are like great basketball players who could arguably, go to the WNBA right now and play at a pretty high level, are basically forced to stay at school longer than they should, which is a stupid rule. Like, why can't Paige Bueckers at the age of 20 play in the WNBA? She could probably play at a high level. She could. I mean, does it help their development? Is there like scientific studies on this? I don't think so. I think it's just the fact that like these rules were probably written a while ago, and the WNBA isn't that popular a sport, so it doesn't get talked about as much. But that's what we're here to do, is talk about it. It's just kind of a weird rule. But listen, women's basketball is a really cool sport. I don't watch a lot of it personally, like I said, but I really like watching Bueckers, and Clark, and Ionescu when she was there too. I watch a little bit of the New York Liberty games because that's where Sabrina plays as well. But that being said, I also I've been hearing things about Cameron Brink from Stanford. I've also been hearing the fact she's like the goddaughter of Del Curry, apparently. I had no idea. And on top of all of that, like she's basically like family with the Currys. So I guess that means I'm her biggest fan now. I guess I'm Cameron Brink's biggest fan because I love the Currys. No. But hey, if she be getting that private coaching from Steph, though, I'm just saying I may have to support. But Sabrina and Steph are actually like friends too, because Sabrina's from the Bay Area, which is even cooler. But yeah, I mean, I think it's cool. Like in terms of in terms of a pure viewership perspective, like the female NCAA is really cool because you have that familiarity and that familiar aspect of things with like, the same players coming back and you watching that same team over and over again for 4 years and then them graduating and moving on to the league. So you get very familiar, I guess, with lineups and the team if you're like a really big fan of them. So I could see that. Paige Bueckers, I mean, don't feel bad if she's not making any money because Paige Bueckers is making a shit ton of money. I mean, this whole like endorsement deal with colleges, like which we talked about actually on episode 1, funny enough. Paige Bueckers is making like I think 70 or 80K a year just off her name, or even more probably. Just like being like she has like merch that says like Paige Buckets on it. Like she's got plenty of money. Like don't worry about Paige Bueckers or any of the top WNBA or top potential WNBA draft picks because they're making plenty of money in college. So it benefited them the most, really, that whole rule. But WNBA and female college basketball is really just an underbelly kind of basketball right now as a whole. And so it's going to be really exciting to see how this culture grows and how the WNBA and all of these things grow before our very eyes, because it is a growing sport. And the fact is, like, we're in an era where things are growing and things are changing. So going to be exciting to see how this all pans out. But yes,